Sketches by Boz. Part 3. Characters. Chapter 1. Thoughts about people. It is strange with how little notice, good, bad, or indifferent, a man may live and die in London. He awakens no sympathy in the breast of any single person. His existence is a matter of interest to no one save himself. He cannot be said to be forgotten when he dies, for no one remembered him when he was alive. There is a numerous class of people in this great metropolis who seem not to possess a single friend, and whom nobody appears to care for. Urged by imperative necessity in the first instance, they have resorted to London in search of employment and the means of subsistence. It is hard, we know, to break the ties which bind us to our homes and friends, and harder still to efface the thousand recollections of happy days and old times, which have been slumbering in our bosom for years, and only rush upon the mind to bring before it associations connected with the friends we have left, the scenes we have beheld too probably for the last time, and the hopes we once cherished, but may entertain no more. These men, however, happily for themselves, have long forgotten such thoughts. Old country friends have died or emigrated. Former correspondents have become lost, like themselves, in the crowd and turmoil of some busy city, and they have gradually settled down into mere passive creatures of habit and endurance. We were seated in the enclosure of St. James's Park the other day, when our attention was attracted by a man whom we immediately put down in our own mind as one of this class. He was a tall, thin, pale person, in a black coat, scanty gray trousers, little pinched-up gaiters, and brown beaver gloves. He had an umbrella in his hand, not for use, for the day was fine, but evidently because he always carried one to the office in the morning. He walked up and down before the little patch of grass on which the chairs were placed for hire, not as if he were doing it for pleasure or recreation, but as if it were a matter of compulsion, just as he would walk to the office every morning from the back settlements of Islington. It was Monday. He had escaped for 24 hours from the thraldom of the desk, and was walking here for exercise and amusement, perhaps for the first time in his life. We were inclined to think he had never had a holiday before, and that he did not know what to do with himself. Children were playing on the grass, groups of people were loitering about, chatting and laughing. But the man walked steadily up and down, unheeding and unheeded, his spare, pale face looking as if it were incapable of bearing the expression of curiosity or interest. There was something in the man's manner and appearance which told us, we fancied, his whole life, or rather his whole day, for a man of this sort has no variety of days. We thought we almost saw the dingy little back office into which he walks every morning, hanging his hat on the same peg, and placing his legs beneath the same desk, first taking off that black coat which lasts the year through, and putting on the one which did duty last year, and which he keeps in his desk to save the other. There he sits till 5 o'clock, working on, all day, as regularly as the dial over the mantelpiece, whose loud ticking is as monotonous as his whole existence, only raising his head when someone enters the counting-house, or when, in the midst of some difficult calculation, he looks up to the ceiling as if there were inspiration in the dusty skylight with a green knot in the center of every pane of glass. About 5 or half past, he slowly dismounts from his accustomed stool, and again changing his coat, proceeds to his usual dining place, somewhere near Bucklesbury. The waiter recites the bill of fare in a rather confidential manner, for he is a regular customer, and after inquiring, "What's in the best cut?" and "What was up last?" he orders a small plate of roast beef, with greens, and half a pint of porter. He has a small plate today, because greens are a penny more than potatoes, and he had 2 breads yesterday, with the additional enormity of a cheese the day before. This important point settled, he hangs up his hat, he took it off the moment he sat down, and bespeaks the paper after the next gentleman. If he can get it while he is at dinner, he eats with much greater zest, balancing it against the water bottle, and eating a bit of beef, and reading a line or two alternately. Exactly at 5 minutes before the hour is up, he produces a shilling, pays the reckoning, carefully deposits the change in his waistcoat pocket, first deducting a penny for the waiter, and returns to the office, from which, if it is not a foreign post night, he again sallies forth in about half an hour. He then walks home at his usual pace to his little back room at Islington, where he has his tea, perhaps solacing himself during the meal with the conversation of his landlady's little boy, whom he occasionally rewards with a penny for solving problems in simple addition. Sometimes there is a letter or two to take up to his employers in Russell Square, and then the wealthy man of business, hearing his voice, calls out from the dining parlor, "Come in, Mr. Smith!" And Mr. Smith, putting his hat at the feet of one of the hall chairs, walks timidly in, and being condescendingly desired to sit down, carefully tucks his legs under his chair, and sits at a considerable distance from the table while he drinks a glass of sherry which is poured out for him by the eldest boy, and after drinking which, he backs and slides out of the room in a state of nervous agitation from which he does not perfectly recover until he finds himself once more in the Islington Road. Poor, harmless creatures such men are. Contented but not happy. Broken-spirited and humbled. They may feel no pain, but they never know pleasure. Compare these men with another class of beings who, like them, have neither friend nor companion, but whose position in society is the result of their own choice. These are generally old fellows with white heads and red faces, addicted to port wine and Hessian boots, who from some cause, real or imaginary, generally the former, the excellent reason being that they are rich and their relations poor, grow suspicious of everybody, and do the misanthropical in chambers, taking great delight in thinking themselves unhappy, and making everybody they come near miserable. You may see such men as these anywhere. You will know them at coffee-houses by their discontented exclamations and the luxury of their dinners, at theaters by their always sitting in the same place and looking with a jaundiced eye on all the young people near them, at church by the pomposity with which they enter, and the loud tone in which they repeat the responses, at parties by their getting cross at whist and hating music. An old fellow of this kind will have his chambers splendidly furnished, and collect books, plate, and pictures about him in profusion, not so much for his own gratification, as to be superior to those who have the desire, but not the means, to compete with him. He belongs to 2 or 3 clubs, and is envied, and flattered, and hated by the members of them all. Sometimes he will be appealed to by a poor relation, a married nephew perhaps, for some little assistance, and then he will declaim with honest indignation on the improvidence of young married people, the worthlessness of a wife, the insolence of having a family, the atrocity of getting into debt with £125 a year, and other unpardonable crimes, winding up his exhortations with a complacent review of his own conduct and a delicate allusion to parochial relief. He dies, some days after dinner, of apoplexy, having bequeathed his property to a public society, and the institution erects a tablet to his memory, expressive of their admiration of his Christian conduct in the world, and their comfortable conviction of his happiness in the next. But, next to our very particular friends, hackney coachmen, cabmen, and cads, whom we admire in proportion to the extent of their cool impudence and perfect self-possession, there is no class of people who amuse us more than London apprentices. They are no longer an organized body, bound down by solemn compact to terrify His Majesty's subjects whenever it pleases them, to take offense in their heads and staves in their hands. They are only bound, now, by indentures. And, as to their valor, it is easily restrained by the wholesome dread of the new police, and a prospective view of a damp station-house, terminating in a police office and a reprimand. They are still, however, a peculiar class, and not the less pleasant for being inoffensive. Can anyone fail to have noticed them in the streets on Sunday? And were there ever such harmless efforts at the grand and magnificent as the young fellows display? We walked down the Strand, a Sunday or 2 ago, behind a little group, and they furnished food for our amusement the whole way. They had come out of some part of the city. It was between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were on their way to the park. There were 4 of them, all arm in arm, with white kid gloves like so many bridegrooms, light trousers of unprecedented patterns, and coats for which the English language has yet no name. A kind of cross between a greatcoat and a surtout, with the collar of the one, the skirts of the other, and pockets peculiar to themselves. Each of the gentlemen carried a thick stick with a large tassel at the top, which he occasionally twirled gracefully round, and the whole four, by way of looking easy and unconcerned, were walking with a paralytic swagger irresistibly ludicrous. One of the party had a watch about the size and shape of a reasonable Ribstone pippin, jammed into his waistcoat pocket, which he carefully compared with the clocks at St. Clement's and the New Church, the illuminated clock at Exeter Change, the clock of St. Martin's Church, and the clock of the Horse Guards. When they at last arrived in St. James's Park, the member of the party who had the best-made boots on hired a second chair expressly for his feet, and flung himself on this twopennyworth of sylvan luxury with an air which levelled all distinctions between Brooks and Snooks, Crockfords and Bagnage Wells. We may smile at such people, but they can never excite our anger. They are usually on the best terms with themselves, and it follows almost as a matter of course, in good humor with everyone about them. Besides, they are always the faint reflection of higher lights, and if they do display a little occasional foolery in their own proper persons, it is surely more tolerable than precocious puppyism in the Quadrant, whiskered dandyism in Regent Street and Pall Mall, or gallantry in its dotage anywhere. Chapter 2. A Christmas Dinner. Christmas time. That man must be a misanthrope indeed, in whose breast something like a jovial feeling is not roused, in whose mind some pleasant associations are not awakened, by the recurrence of Christmas. There are people who will tell you that Christmas is not to them what it used to be, that each succeeding Christmas has found some cherished hope or happy prospect of the year before, dimmed or passed away, that the present only serves to remind them of reduced circumstances and straitened incomes, of the feasts they once bestowed on hollow friends, and of the cold looks that meet them now, in adversity and misfortune. Never heed such dismal reminiscences. There are few men who have lived long enough in the world who cannot call up such thoughts any day in the year. Then do not select the merriest of the 365 for your doleful recollections, but draw your chair nearer the blazing fire, fill the glass and send round the song. And if your room be smaller than it was a dozen years ago, or if your glass be filled with reeking punch instead of sparkling wine, put a good face on the matter, and empty it offhand, and fill another, and troll off the old ditty you used to sing, and thank God it's no worse. Look on the merry faces of your children, if you have any, as they sit round the fire. One little seat may be empty. One slight form that gladdened the father's heart, and roused the mother's pride to look upon, may not be there. Dwell not upon the past. Think not that 1 short year ago, the fair child now resolving into dust, sat before you with the bloom of health upon its cheek, and the gaiety of infancy in its joyous eye. Reflect upon your present blessings, of which every man has many, not on your past misfortunes, of which all men have some. Fill your glass again, with a merry face and a contented heart. Our life on it, but your Christmas shall be merry, and your New Year a happy one. Who can be insensible to the outpourings of good feeling and the honest interchange of affectionate attachment which abound at this season of the year? A Christmas family party. We know nothing in nature more delightful. There seems a magic in the very name of Christmas. Petty jealousies and discords are forgotten. Social feelings are awakened in bosoms to which they have long been strangers. Father and son, or brother and sister, who have met and passed with averted gaze or a look of cold recognition for months before, proffer and return the cordial embrace, and bury their past animosities in their present happiness. Kindly hearts that have yearned towards each other, but have been withheld by false notions of pride and self-dignity, are again reunited, and all is kindness and benevolence. Would that Christmas lasted the whole year through, as it ought, and that the prejudices and passions which deform our better nature were never called into action among those to whom they should ever be strangers. The Christmas family party that we mean is not a mere assemblage of relations, got up at a week or two's notice, originating this year, having no family precedent in the last, and not likely to be repeated in the next. No, it is an annual gathering of all the accessible members of the family, young or old, rich or poor, and all the children look forward to it for 2 months beforehand in a fever of anticipation. Formerly, it was held at Grandpapa's, but Grandpapa getting old, and Grandmama getting old too, and rather infirm, they have given up housekeeping and domesticated themselves with Uncle George, so the party always takes place at Uncle George's. But Grandmama sends in most of the good things, and Grandpapa always will toddle down all the way to Newgate Market to buy the turkey, which he engages a porter to bring home behind him in triumph, always insisting on the man's being rewarded with a glass of spirits over and above his hire to drink a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to Aunt George. As to Grandmama, she is very secret and mysterious for 2 or 3 days beforehand, but not sufficiently so to prevent rumors getting afloat that she has purchased a beautiful new cap with pink ribbons for each of the servants, together with sundry books and penknives and pencil cases for the younger branches, to say nothing of diverse secret additions to the order originally given by Aunt George at the pastry cook's, such as another dozen of mince pies for the dinner, and a large plum cake for the children. On Christmas Eve, Grandmama is always in excellent spirits, and after employing all the children during the day in stoning the plums and all that, insists regularly every year on Uncle George coming down into the kitchen, taking off his coat, and stirring the pudding for half an hour or so, which Uncle George good-humoredly does, to the vociferous delight of the children and servants. The evening concludes with a glorious game of blindman's buff, in an early stage of which Grandpapa takes great care to be caught, in order that he may have an opportunity of displaying his dexterity. On the following morning, the old couple, with as many of the children as the pew will hold, go to church in great state, leaving Aunt George at home dusting decanters and filling casters, and Uncle George carrying bottles into the dining parlor and calling for corkscrews and getting into everybody's way. When the church party return to lunch, Grandpapa produces a small sprig of mistletoe from his pocket and tempts the boys to kiss their little cousins under it, a proceeding which affords both the boys and the old gentleman unlimited satisfaction, but which rather outrages Grandmama's ideas of decorum, until Grandpapa says that when he was just 13 and 3 months old, he kissed Grandmama under a mistletoe too, on which the children clap their hands and laugh very heartily, as do Aunt George and Uncle George, and Grandmama looks pleased and says with a benevolent smile that Grandpapa was an impudent young dog, on which the children laugh very heartily again, and Grandpapa more heartily than any of them. But all these diversions are nothing to the subsequent excitement when Grandmama in a high cap and slate-colored silk gown, and Grandpapa with a beautifully plaited shirt frill and white neckerchief, seat themselves on one side of the drawing-room fire, with Uncle George's children and little cousins innumerable, seated in the front, waiting the arrival of the expected visitors. Suddenly, a hackney coach is heard to stop, and Uncle George, who has been looking out of the window, exclaims, "Here's Jane!" On which the children rush to the door and helter-skelter downstairs, and Uncle Robert and Aunt Jane, and the dear little baby and the nurse, and the whole party are ushered upstairs amidst tumultuous shouts of "Oh my!" from the children, and frequently repeated warnings not to hurt baby from the nurse. And Grandpapa takes the child, and Grandmama kisses her daughter, and the confusion of this first entry has scarcely subsided when some other aunts and uncles with more cousins arrive, and the grown-up cousins flirt with each other, and so do the little cousins too, for that matter, and nothing is to be heard but a confused din of talking, laughing, and merriment. A hesitating double knock at the street door, heard during a momentary pause in the conversation, excites a general inquiry of, "Who's that?" And 2 or 3 children, who have been standing at the window, announce in a low voice that it's poor Aunt Margaret, upon which Aunt George leaves the room to welcome the newcomer, and Grandmama draws herself up, rather stiff and stately, for Margaret married a poor man without her consent, and poverty not being a sufficiently weighty punishment for her offense, has been discarded by her friends, and debarred the society of her dearest relatives. But Christmas has come round, and the unkind feelings that have struggled against better dispositions during the year have melted away before its genial influence, like half-formed ice beneath the morning sun. It is not difficult in a moment of angry feeling for a parent to denounce a disobedient child, but to banish her at a period of general goodwill and hilarity from the hearth, round which she has sat on so many anniversaries of the same day, expanding by slow degrees from infancy to girlhood, and then bursting, almost imperceptibly, into a woman, is widely different. The air of conscious rectitude and cold forgiveness which the old lady has assumed sits ill upon her, and when the poor girl is led in by her sister, pale in looks and broken in hope, not from poverty, for that she could bear, but from the consciousness of undeserved neglect and unmerited unkindness, it is easy to see how much of it is assumed. A momentary pause succeeds. The girl breaks suddenly from her sister and throws herself, sobbing, on her mother's neck. The father steps hastily forward and takes her husband's hand. Friends crowd round to offer their hearty congratulations, and happiness and harmony again prevail. As to the dinner, it's perfectly delightful. Nothing goes wrong, and everybody is in the very best of spirits, and disposed to please and be pleased. Grandpapa relates a circumstantial account of the purchase of the turkey, with a slight digression relative to the purchase of previous turkeys on former Christmas days, which Grandmama corroborates in the minutest particular. Uncle George tells stories, and carves poultry, and takes wine, and jokes with the children at the side table, and winks at the cousins that are making love, or being made love to, and exhilarates everybody with his good humor and hospitality. And when, at last, a stout servant staggers in with a gigantic pudding, with a sprig of holly in the top, there is such a laughing, shouting, and clapping of little chubby hands, and kicking up of fat dumpy legs, as can only be equaled by the applause with which the astonishing feat of pouring lighted brandy into mince pies is received by the younger visitors. Then the dessert, and the wine, and the fun. Such beautiful speeches, and such songs from Aunt Margaret's husband, who turns out to be such a nice man, and so attentive to Grandmama. Even Grandpapa not only sings his annual song with unprecedented vigor, but, on being honored with a unanimous encore, according to annual custom, actually comes out with a new one, which nobody but Grandmama ever heard before, and a young scapegrace of a cousin, who has been in some disgrace with the old people for certain heinous sins of omission and commission, neglecting to call, and persisting in drinking Burton ale, astonishes everybody into convulsions of laughter by volunteering the most extraordinary comic songs that ever were heard. And thus the evening passes, in a strain of rational goodwill and cheerfulness, doing more to awaken the sympathies of every member of the party in behalf of his neighbor, and to perpetuate their good feeling during the ensuing year, than half the homilies that have ever been written by half the divines that have ever lived.